Take a breather, recharge, and join us on the Rivalry Cooldown, where we give you an unfiltered view on the current topics in esports from the experts. On today's episode, we're going to pick up where we left off last time, jumping into one of our favorite cooldown topics, developer disaster, taking a look at the launch of Overwatch League, the mass Blizzard layoffs, and some of the issues surrounding Blizzard and Activision, as well as taking a look at Apex, maybe one example of not disaster. On this episode, we have a continuation of last episode's crew with Richard Lewis, Slasher, Nahaz, and Sajedene. Let's jump right in.
Hard to measure credentials, fine, but it's often not hard to measure, is this guy at all invested in a thing? If you're not invested in a thing, I will immediately, if not discount, I'm immediately going to downweight your opinion a little bit. Because it turns out a lot of people, a lot of us, we post a lot of shit on social media. A lot of us say things that we haven't fully thought out. It happens. But there's no denying that somebody that has something to lose on a particular topic, that's the first opinion that I tend to trust.
So you totally trust the Overwatch commissioner with their opening scrims.
Look, I don't. Do you guys really think, how big a story do you guys think that is? Specifically, Richard, I know your feelings about Blizzard. Nick, you've seen a lot of shit. Is that a big story?
To summarize for people who don't know what's happening, because that was a veiled reference. So basically, it's preseason, and Blizzard wanted to publicly show scrims, but what was it? They refused to call them preseason matches or something.
Right.
And they were like, these aren't preseason matches. They're just scrims. They don't mean anything. We just want to show them to you guys so you have some content. And so the teams, like, they had tank players playing DPS, and they moved the roles around, they did whatever. Yeah, right? And everybody who don't try, and then the Overwatch commissioner comes out and says, it's so inappropriate for these players to do this during preseason matches. It's like, you specifically said not to call them that. So there's the backstory. I'll go back to Nahaz's question.
None of this matters. The story doesn't matter either way. I can't be more bored with this freaking thing. It doesn't matter. But even if we actually were to take it a little bit seriously, I mean, maybe, it has nothing to do with anything. Maybe, Blizzard should give a reason for the teams to actually care about the preseason or the scrim matches or whatever it is. This doesn't happen. If you watch sports, preseason doesn't matter. Sports or esports or gaming. So this is just... And
the NFL has the same problem, because the NFL, when you buy a PSL for these home tickets at NFL stadiums, you are paying, like it or not, for those preseason games. And they have the same issues. It's not... we have to learn this lesson apparently over and over again in Dota too, where last year we had a couple high-profile tournaments that had third-place matches and nobody gave a fuck and everybody acted surprised. Or
the seeding matches.
I was backstage when somebody that we all know, who's very, very good at his job, who was very respected, got like literally some random person from the tournament organizer running up to him, kind of yelling at him, saying, you didn't hype up this third-place match enough. And it's like, get the... Anyway, I didn't think this was much of a story.
Yeah, but Blizzard stock's down by 50%, right? Is that what you said?
Well, they're about to fire hundreds of employees tomorrow, which is much worse than their scrim schedule for the season.
Bring all your dirty laundry to me.
Right.
I am here for you.
Please do. I actually didn't know that their shares are down 51% from October. They're down 50, basically a quarter, and they're down 50%. That is how badly the analyst outlook for this particular company is looking, and it has all the hallmarks. We've seen this in other areas of entertainment, where the people that kind of grew up with the space get to run the scene, and their reaches ideally the sort of more profit-oriented, the professional business people, the professional managers kind of get cycled in and transitioned in, and they help find a stable long-term equilibrium. This has all the hallmarks of things got bad, people decided we're not making enough money, and there's just this regime shift. And that just never goes well.
So what about...
What?
I think they're... Because they were recently hiring, and then now they're firing. So I think there's a merger or something happening, maybe. I don't know. It's weird.
What do you think of the Overwatch decision to market something explicitly as a preseason, then say, no, it's not a preseason, then have the commissioner come out and say people aren't taking the preseason seriously enough?
To me, it's not surprising. I just from what I've experienced working or dealing and hearing with like how they work internally, it's just like, so there's just like this whole, I want to be this, but I don't know how to do it. Yeah. But I'm just going to keep talking like as if I know what I'm doing.
That's Overwatch in a nutshell, yeah.
Yeah, so wow. Me, I'm just like, it doesn't surprise me, and I still think that their layoffs are a bigger story just because it's like, it was kind of expected, but at the same time not, because it hasn't even been like, maybe it's like been a month since I know that they were going.
By the way, how is it that no one has questioned the fact that why is there an extended off season in esports to begin with?
Apparently it's not a bad thing. When you want players should be able to take off some time during the year.
I think you're right.
Probably too long, but
I think you've got to be careful, because I think that is one thing that is endemic to the whole streaming media distribution platform, that there is always going to be something brighter and shinier. And if you're not, this is what my big sort of beef with Valve during 2 iterations ago in the major scene was, we were at this point where the top teams basically weren't playing outside of 4 or 5 events in a year. And my thing has always been, you got to have your stuff on display. Or if you literally are at 0, putting out nothing, when the next shiny thing comes along and you never know when it's going to, you better be ready for the consequences, and you better be ready for the fact that there's a lot of that viewer base that you are going to have to earn back.
And so that's what the new shiny thing right now is Apex, for sure. So was Fortnite prepared? What do we think? I mean, everybody's asking that. I know it's like the most boring question ever, but Apex has actually maintained, normally a day 1 or 2 launch, it's really exciting, everybody's playing, and then people go back. And Apex is not going back, it's staying popular.
So yeah, I think that, so here's the thing with Apex. I actually think there are like half a dozen really interesting questions that Apex asks. And I actually don't know if I have the answer to any of these, but I'll rattle a few of them off. Like, I think the way that they did their launch is very interesting. The fact that their launch was basically, here's our game. And obviously that there are a lot of factors about the game essentially coming from Titanfall 2 that make it so that they can do that. But it's very interesting. Eminem actually had kind of a neat crossover quote where he talked about the release of his album After Revival, which got really hammered, and he felt like people had basically made up their minds by the time it came out. And so his next album was sort of released, here it is. And that's the first, to me, I mean, it's one of the first multiplayers that we've had like a cold launch like that. It argues to me, it plays into some things that I've been saying about, I think that the market and the notion of brand equity and brand loyalty for competitive multiplayer titles is just completely different than for AAA titles. I think that they're functionally, there is no brand loyalty, or at least it's very different and much smaller. I think it begs the question of where the BR genre is going. I think Apex is so good partially because it's an actual tweak of the BR formula, where the gameplay focuses more on interactions of mechanics than it does on the individual survival element. And then I think that there's something really interesting that's happened with esports around it, where there are at least a couple of organizations, I know at least one is announced, that have actually signed multi-title esport teams that are basically, they're going to be competing in Blackout as well. The one that's announced, I know, is going to be competing in Blackout as well as Apex. And I really wonder if you're going to see more of that, and possibly in different genres.
I think you have to sort of justify the expenditure these days. Yeah. There's so many different battle royale games. How could you have a squad for every one? At least Fortnite is, I would say, distinct in the sense that it has mechanics that aren't in any of the others. So there's less cross-translation. I was more interested in the marketing aspect of this, because you're right, we haven't seen many cold launches in video games. We almost take it for granted now that you actually follow a video game launch for about 18 months before it drops, right?
And it's such a big part of the industry. right? I mean, such a big part is structured around that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, this is why, you know, games journalism is like, you know, scores are meaningless now, because if I'm getting all the free content for a game that's coming out, I got to give it at least, like, even if it's garbage, I got to give it a 6. And a 6 is above average, but actually a 6 may as well be a 1 in the out of 10 scale. And then the percentages are all like 70% is a bad score. Like, scores are nonsense because of this content driven marketing clamor that we have. But what the reason I think Apex Legends did this and why EA did this in particular, I mean, first of all, I think it was kind of, they tweaked it late. I think it was originally going to be something else, and then they saw Battle Royale taking off, so they wanted to do it. I think EA have learned a little bit after being consistently called the worst company in the world for however many fucking years, that they're like, you know what, there's no point in hyping this up and marketing it, because everyone's going to say it's us doing another cash grab like we did with all the mobile games like Command and Conquer and Dungeon Keeper. Everyone's going to just dunk on it. And then also the Super Bowl Cloverfield paradox, which proved, you know, the movie on Netflix, which proved you could actually market a huge piece of shit. And if it was just a surprise, people like surprises. Like, even if you open the box and it's shit, well, somebody took the time to shit in a box and send it to me and wrap it up. So, you know what? I'm going to allow it. It's fine. You know, that movie was absolute garbage, but was a huge success by the metrics that Netflix used. And it just dropped with a Super Bowl commercial that nobody had known was coming. And, you know, we're starting to see it with movies all the time now. You know, Bird Box was the same. It just turned up on Christmas. Another huge piece of shit movie. But I think this is going to start becoming something we see more and more of, games that follow fads.
Absolutely. No, and if you notice this year in the Super Bowl, it wasn't quite as high profile. I don't even remember the name. It was something about this. It was a young girl's name. It was a Prime Video product that dropped on the Super Bowl, and it basically said, first episode available for the next 24 hours.
Yeah,
on
right.
Prime. And I the minute I saw that, I was like, man, how long is it before we have a complete surprise title announced at a big gaming event or convention with, you know, the event ends on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, and open beta or beta available on Monday for 24 hours, something like that.
Like
I think
or a DreamHack event where everybody has computers there already, and so they're like.
I do think there should be context given within. Apex Legends just happens to hit all of the right notes to be able to make this happen. One,
all great successes do, absolutely.
It should not be surprising to anybody that Apex Legends was able to kind of get into the market, because Battle Royale, while there may have been a few of them, like Blackout was so huge because it does appeal to a different player base. As Richard mentioned, Fortnite and the mechanics of building is kind of like a specialty, and it's one of the reasons that Fortnite is so big. And
it's also just the demographic, right? That's the thing about Fortnite.
Yeah, but it's the gameplay. Okay, the reason that Apex Legends works so well is the gameplay of the game is more realistic. It's not a Fortnite style building mechanic cartoon game. Blackout came along and was then alongside PUBG. Yeah, you had CSGO BR, but that's kind of all, like, CSGO BR is all fucked up anyway, so it's not really a contender in this whole thing. But Blackout, yeah, while it got Call of Duty people, it showed that people kind of wanted a more faster paced thing that wasn't PUBG. It's not Fortnite because people don't want to build, and that's why something like Apex Legends is able to do so well. So then being able to have the release schedule of inviting a ton of top streamers, because you also have to realize that pretty much the most popular streamers on Twitch are FPS players, and most of them came from esports titles previously and are now big streamers because of their skill. And there's a reason like why that is, that they're really all FPS players. So a game like Apex Legends that comes out of the middle of nowhere, made by a AAA developer, already having an engine around a very popular game that they did, then merging that into Battle Royale so they don't have to build an entire new engine and a new game to do this at the right time, and then being able to invite all the top streamers that play that genre and this game mode, and is then able to release the game, which only works because the game is good. If the game was bad, then they would have gotten a ton of shit, but Respawn has actually done a very good job. And along with Richard said, the EA has been hit so hard by being the complete worst company in video games. It's free to play, and it's free progression in the game. You don't have to spend money to get stuff in the game. So they did the best possible everything to make this work. So if this type of this is not going to work for other games a lot of the time. This is one of the very few examples of all of this coming together at one time to happen.
Because
it worked for auto chess.
The big streamers, right? You look at Shroud pulling 150K last night on that game.
But that's his game. This is his.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a pro FPS from Counter-Strike, then played PUBG.
But isn't Shroud like a 40K streamer though?
But
I think that's the point Nahaz is trying to make.
Yeah, no, but it's the growth of the individual streamer is directly tied to his background and 100%. History in the genre of the game. So why Ninja 100%. Blew up with Fortnite is because he had a lot of time playing Halo, which is actually kind of similar, and H1Z1, which is actually kind of similar to Fortnite. So we had the mechanics and the skills to be great at Fortnite. Shroud is great and realistic for first-person shooters. So with Apex being the hot game, of course his skills translate to the game, and now everyone wants to watch Shroud because it's Apex Legends. Ninja will get great
it's on
viewership.
Display, right? That's the other component we talk about. We talk about PUBG and Overwatch having these spectator problems where the skill of the players is not necessarily evident to even motivated viewers. There's something about Apex that, you could watch out. You don't have to know anything about gaming to see this guy playing.
Well, it's a faster game. It's faster gunplay. It's faster movement. You can kill more things in more time. And the map is a little bit smaller, where PUBG is much more tactical and strategical in the way that the gameplay moves on within the circle and the confines of the genre. And that's what Apex Blackout is great, but messed up because Vandahar and Infinity Ward are going through their own problems. Fucking Activision again. So they have their own issues. And now Respawn somehow is able to find this magical hole of all things colliding to make their game the hot thing. Probably for a while, because it's a good game and I played it. It really is a solid game. I do not see it going anywhere because of how good the game is.
The question, I guess, though, is that we when we talk about skill cap of games, we tend to treat it as okay, well, that's a static thing. And I think time will see if it's right or wrong. And the thing is, I'm not good enough. I'm horrible at shooters. I'm not good enough at these kind of games to assess this. Apex is a game that I think the initial skill cap is great. It's right there. It rewards people who come in that are good at shooters. When you look at how abilities interact and how balance is going to work, I'm not sure that it's going to have a great dynamic skill cap. I think that game seems to me on the surface of things to possibly have some of the same problems, the same structural problems that make Overwatch difficult to balance, just based on the hero pool and the way that they interact with each other. But again, it's a great thing for now, and I agree with you. I think this game has at least a couple months of dominance in it.
I would say way longer. Yeah, it could have some of the issues regarding the meta, but one of the big things that people keep forgetting that make Overwatch all messed up when it comes to the meta is the amount of abilities with shields and things that allow you to not be able to kill the other opponent. And in Apex, yeah, there's a shield in the game, but until it gets to kind of insane abilities where you are just unable to kill other people, generally it won't have the same problems because your overall FPS mechanics of aim and movement, position, and all that stuff will usually override the abilities, so there won't be as many problems. And it actually makes it a little bit unique and different as we continue to see that the evolution of Battle Royale, the genre, can go a ton of different ways, and they're still trying to figure out the best way of
and I don't think there is a unique optimum. When people talk of I've already gotten a little bit triggered reading people talk about, is Apex a Fortnite killer or is it a PUBG killer? First of all, I think it's a mistake. Nobody's competing with Fortnite in its demographic right now. Okay, it's just a different constituency. And the second thing is, I think the particular innovations that Apex has introduced to the BR formula are very clever, and there's something that the genre has not explored before. And I think they're going to get rewarded because they're pushing that gameplay in sort of a new coordinate direction. I don't think that there's this global optimum when you talk about a battle royale. I think there's room for a lot of iteration on different dimensions.
There's an interesting question there as well. I think it's a Malcolm Gladwell TED Talk. Maybe it's another, but it's a great TED Talk about pasta sauce. It's a great one about pasta sauce and how there were never any options. And so this guy who was a food scientist made 30 options and completely saved Prego and boosted them. But the counterpart is now people have too many to choose from. Mm-hmm. And so if you already know that you like really spicy, chunky potato sauce with a lot of oregano, you can be happy because you can go into the store and buy it. But if you have no idea what the hell you want, you stand there with 40 options in front of you and go, oh my God, what do I want? And that's almost what we're seeing happening in Battle Royale to me right now, is that there's so many options. You don't quite know what you want, so you will always complain because it will never quite be right, because you feel like you have this freedom of choice, and the freedom of choice takes away sometimes the fun of it, because you can't just accept the game. You see, oh, well, I wish I had I saw this, a big streamer absolutely loved Apex, but hated the skins. I'm like, oh man, Fortnite has such pretty outfits. Like, I want to look cool. These guys don't look cool. But I love the game. It's just like, well, Fortnite's made for 8-year-olds with pretty outfits. Apex is made for people who shoot well. And it's,
well, you're going to see a lot more this clamor for kind of like activations and crossovers, you know.
Yes.
This is one of the things that I think PUBG dropped the ball on a little bit, didn't really capitalize when they were top dog. I saw their really awful Suicide Squad tie-in, which anyone would want to tie in with that god-awful movie. I don't know, but, you know, they put like some DC characters in, which is cool and all, even though the Joker looked terrible. But the Harley Quinn skin was pretty good. But then it's like, okay, well, Fortnite got every NFL jersey in the game. Fuck you, right? So it's like you know, you lose that one. And I'm sure there's going to be a big thing in Apex Legends very soon. A mainstream company is going to come in and they're going to want to put some sort of branding, some sort of skin in the game. You know, I agree. I think there's a lot going on right now with the Battle Royale space. I don't think there's a definitive title, honestly, in terms of which one you can point to and objectively say is the best, and not only the best for esports, which is obviously what I'm principally concerned with. So yeah, it's tough. I don't know what Apex Legends really does to that paradigm. I don't think much. I don't think it's an esport. I don't think it will be. I don't think they're going to have an esport attached to it, except maybe a couple of tournaments here or there, which is very EA and kind of DICE standard fare.
Have they unveiled like their spectator mode and how it's going to work yet? Or
no. And currently it is quite bad. The current one sucks. Major.
That's like a big factor as far as, I mean, you know, going back to Overwatch, even though it's not a battle royale game, it's so hard to watch. And it's the same issue with Dota sometimes, like, and MOBA genres in general, is that if I want to show this to my dad, he's like, I know Crystal Maiden, but I don't know what the heck is happening. Right. It's just very colorful.
And it's interesting to me.
I show him Counter-Strike, and he's like, oh, someone gets headshot. I got it. That's good. That's great.
I'm just glad somebody asked that question, because it's interesting to me. A lot of these discussions that I end up a part of, both formally and informally, that is the one glaring question that nobody asks. Nobody talks about spectator mode features, despite, you know, I think a lot of the fact that PUBG esports hasn't taken off like a lot of people thought it would, the fact that Overwatch has struggled relative to expectations as well, boil down to limitations on that particular dimension.
Well, what's unfortunate is that Realm Royale actually put a significant investment into amazing spectator modes. I spoke to some people at High Res. I had them ask me, they said, what, because I had been working a lot of PUBG things for DreamHack, and I was talking to them ahead of an event, and they said, what would you want, just very casually, what would you want in a spectator mode for a Battle Royale? What is PUBG missing? And I said a bunch of things, and they told me what their designers were thinking, and they'd already, you know, were on the same path, and they built an incredible spectator mode for Realm Royale. It was kind of similar to golf in that there were cameras in different areas that you would just like jump to, that would contextualize where you were. And they did a lot of amazing things for the spectator mode. They killed the rest of the game.
Yeah.
But they thought about that. I mean, they released the alpha, and then it was like 2 weeks later that they made their prime focus developing a really good spectator mode.
Which I think is a mistake. I want to go back to this. I go back in that discussion to the things that Rod was saying earlier. Like, the fact is, the number one thing is you have to have a really good game.
Well, they did. They had a good game. They made a good spectator mode, and then they made it a bad game.
It's all right. I'm not going to say it was a good game. Realm Royale is aight. Right?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
not good. It's aight.
You should start your own review website. What's the fucking scale at 5?
Well, all right, I'll just give you
where does I fall on that?
I don't know. So, like, okay, a TechCrunch writer was doing a story about like Fortnite and how like it's becoming like the place to hang out for people, and like she was interviewing me, and I kind of thought about it, and so Battle Royale is so big because you can go in as a solo person and just play the game. You don't need to have friends, and you can go in, and because of the way the game is structured, you don't have to win to feel good. You can still get a couple kills in the game and finish like 20th or 30th and be able to feel good about yourself. You have a higher chance of winning sometimes because of the randomness in the game. And even if you want to play as a team, you're able to team up and be able to kind of everyone play together and have that same team aspect that you would get from other team games inside of BR. Where Overwatch, because it was my best example, is a game that I complain about all the time for being all fucked up with the way the game is one of the more frustrating experiences where you really, really have to work together as a team and reliant on your team to win the game. And while the highs are there, the lows are one of the lowest in all of video games because of the difficulty of kind of working together. So Battle Royale can bring everyone in, and that's part of the reason why the game is so huge. But when, Richard, you say you don't think, like, that's one of the issues that it has for esports, is that even though the game genre and the way it's structured brings a ton of people in to the game itself, it has problems, as you mentioned, Nahaz, about broadcasting, because it's just really hard to broadcast 99, 80 fucking people in one server, split up either in solos, duos, or teams of 4. Right. And it's just like an insane thing to think about compared to a 5v5 or a 6v6 game structured on a map. Yeah, Overwatch has problems because it's really colorful. You have abilities flying everywhere. You got like all types of shit moving really fast, and you have that problem. So you don't have that problem with BR because usually it's realistic games. Fortnite actually has an issue when the circle gets smaller and you have like 10 people stacked on top of each other, and you have fucking buildings everywhere and things flying everywhere. It gets the same issue as Overwatch. So Battle Royale brings everyone in, has a ton of players, really hard for esports based on the structure of the game. But I really think that BR has so many players that it's Apex Legends will be an esport anyway, even if it's hard to broadcast.
There's already a $100,000 Twitch tournament.
Well, yeah. Twitch is going to put in money because that gets some viewers on the website. But that's not like a legitimate tournament.
Well, isn't the multiple tribals thing, isn't that like basically, again, an activation sort of disguised as a tournament circuit, right? I mean, they're basically offering it as the advertising solution, is my understanding, or something.
It's also like part of a new wave of doing esports tournaments that Fortnite has really kind of
let's invite all the famous people so we get more viewers.
It's very smart, right? Fortnite has correctly, in my opinion, understood that a lot of esports stuff occupies this middle ground between pure competition and media event. And they've fallen, a lot of people just talk about those two things as if they're completely different. And, oh, this isn't esports and this is, or this is and this isn't. It's always a spectrum. And Fortnite has gravitated toward the media event end of the spectrum. And I think that they've overdone it. And fortunately, it looks like Epic might, with planes not going through buildings and the like, might be moving a little bit toward the other end of the spectrum that I think Richard and I prefer. But again, I think constituencies matter. I think, until I saw the data from Twitch, for example, it really surprised me. And a lot of people say that it doesn't surprise them, but it surprised me a couple of years ago to find out that the viewership for Dota 2 streams and League of Legends streams was, at least as of 4 years ago, completely disjoint. There was a complete absence of overlap, right? That's what I really wonder. I don't have good data on these BR constituencies. I think we assume, because we see a lot of the big streamers try out multiple of these games, that there's more overlap in the player bases than I think there actually is. I think
everyone likes shooting games, so of course there's going to be overlap between people that play FPS games. I mean,
I think there's less than I think there's a lot less overlap between Fortnite and PUBG than you think. What percentage of Fortnite players do you think have never played PUBG?
High. Very high.
Yeah, but it's still because Fortnite's more popular. But I mean, there's a decent crossover between Fortnite and Apex Legends. Yeah, I mean, they're both kind of fast paced. Yeah, the building aspect isn't there, and that is like the thing again that makes Fortnite mechanically a unique game. But there is some similarities. I mean, I come from FPS background, It really does. Like CS and PUBG actually, for me, have the most overlap for like that style of games. They're really tactical, strategical, kind of more realistic. I mean, CS is kind of arcadey, but kind of like realistic. And these games are like a lot faster. When you can run all the time, it automatically changes the dynamic of like how the gameplay works. It has you as a player, a first-person shooter player, think about how much fun you're going to have playing the game.
See, and this is a legitimate question. I'm not arguing that this is right and what you're saying isn't. I don't know the answer. To me, a very, very big difference is that 12-year-old's mom and dad walk in and he's playing Fortnite on the screen and they don't immediately say, no, that's inappropriate. That same 12-year-old's parents walk in and see Apex Legends up on the screen. I think they're a lot more likely to say, hey.
Well, that 12-year-old was playing Xbox and telling me that he had sex with my mom.
All right.
I knew he was playing Call of Duty, right?
So I think you win this round, Frank.
That's a meme. Yeah, I actually think probably parents are more aware of their kids playing mature games because now people who are like in their 30s grew up as gamers, and now they have kids, and now they don't want their kids to play Call of Duty or Apex Legends as a young kid, and that could be something. But, you know, there's still going to be 13, 14-year-olds playing.
Imagine if you had a reskin. Imagine if you took PUBG and you had like a under 16 reskin that made everything hot pink and bright blue and yellow, and it turned the guns into little like sandbag guns.
You mean if we had a game that was all about dinosaurs and survival, if we all of a sudden just made it like about pirates? Sorry, go on.
I can't handle you right now. But imagine if they had that, just like how PUBG was banned in Germany or something, or it's the 18 plus because there's blood splatters in the game. Like, what if you switched over to a paintball game? What if you had that button? Do you think that PUBG or something like Apex?
Splatoon esports did exist. I want to remind everybody about that. That was a thing.
But I mean, like, what if you could hit that button and suddenly be appropriate for all ages? You could.
No, it would be a
like
meme.
Me, you have someone like me who hates cartoony shit, which is why I don't touch Fortnite, who plays on the normal settings. But then you have someone like Malastrix or Pyrian Flax, right, who's very concerned with what their kids are playing, and says, yeah, hit that button. Like, if you want to play the grown-up game or whatever when you're 16, like, yeah, we can turn the blood splatter back on. But right now it's paintball.
But the game is centered around shooting people in the head. I don't know how exactly you want to get around this concept of how first-person shooters got huge in this culture to begin with. I mean, there is, we don't have to talk about it now, a tie-in of like why first-person shooters were the thing that like led the Western world in competitive gaming.
Still shoots people in the head. It just does it colorfully. That's literally the difference. It's colorful and there's no blood splatter.
But Apex and Call of Duty and Counter-Strike are still realistic shooters. Fortnite is very much a deathmatch shooter.
I mean, Fortnite is to violence what Tom and Jerry is to violence, right? Like, you know, yeah, like, you know, when I see the cat get hit on the head repeatedly with the hammer, I know he's going to be okay, bar a few lumps in the next scene. And I think Fortnite understands that, you know, they explode in a shower of pixels when they die. You have weapons that are so inconceivably stupid that they're hilarious. Giving an inadvertent comedy, like, you know, that disco ball grenade that makes everybody dance on the spot. So I don't even think Fortnite necessarily would qualify as a video game, a violent video game, even for the stuffy authoritarian kind of people that run the Olympics, right? Like the Olympics have said, we don't want violent video games in the Olympics. We don't recognize it as, you know, of course they have sports where.
But boxing's fine.
Yeah, but exactly. Long-term CTE is perfectly acceptable, but seeing a gun in a video game, not so much. But you know, Overwatch, I think, would qualify as well. I think Overwatch has a very cartoonified depiction of violence as well, whereas like PUBG, definitely not. I mean, you know, if you're using real-life guns that are analogous to the guns I can walk into not a Dick's Sporting Goods anymore, but, you know, a Walmart, I suppose, like the one down the road from me. It's got a gun section. I can walk in, I can buy one of the guns in the game. That always makes people nervous and squeamish when you use real life guns. So yeah, I think you have two very distinct audiences, and that's a good thing. I wouldn't want to kidify PUBG, and I think the audience wouldn't appreciate that. And I think if you want a sort of battle royale shooter that is aimed, that skews younger, Fortnite exists, and that's why the marketplace is great. So,
and it's not just an audience thing; it's definitely a sponsor thing too. There are a lot non-endemic sponsors that are very specific. One recent one, like that was just announced, especially that they're like, we will never sponsor first-person shooters unless it's something like Overwatch and Fortnite, because they don't come off as first-person shooters to them. They have, like, we can't look at it as like just like a gaming sponsor, because to them, their audience is, it's the moms that are buying like our product at the stores, or that are, tuning. Like, we don't want to piss them off. So we can't have something that's going to make them go, why are you sponsoring something so violent?
Right. This is a company that understands who their constituency is. Their customer is the person who does their grocery shopping, and they get that. And I did this months back. I did this when Fortnite first got big, because I knew some friends of mine that were not big gamers had I think he's 12 now, a son that played a lot of Fortnite. And I watched them watch him play and get kills and get killed himself. And, the animation where, you just, all your stuff sort of pops out. It's like Richard was saying, it's sort of like the cat getting hit with the hammer. And I was like, all right, I was curious. So I showed them some clips of Overwatch. And even there, like, at least her reaction when somebody got killed in Overwatch was much more, a little bit of a wince. And then, of course, I went to PUBG, and it's like, oh God, no, I'd never let my kid play that. These reactions are instructive, and the big companies, like, they're going to be aware of that, right? The optics of how a game look have big significance, and that's why I think a lot about constituencies.
Yeah, well, as Nikki said as well. Sorry to interject just for a moment, Rod. The sponsor component to it is very important, because how that affects the economics of the industry. I mean, when we were doing E-League, for example, I wouldn't say it was a struggle. I think that's overselling it, but there were definitely some sponsors that were like, sorry, if your first game's Counter-Strike, we're all the way out for that. And one of the reasons we were able to get Arby's was that Arby's had no problem, that the president of Arby's had no issue with the activations we wanted to do, which was we wanted to stay true to Counter-Strike. Right. So we did a segment where we took Counter-Strike players to a firing range to shoot sandwiches with real guns that are in Counter-Strike and blowing them up, and then watching them in slow motion. And it was a great segment, and Arby's loved it. But if the president of that company doesn't support the Second Amendment, that sponsorship doesn't happen, and that's a multi-million-dollar.
But you have to be careful with that, right? Because also of the big fast food chains, Arby's is the one that has the oldest constituency on average. Their constituency is much higher average age than McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, and I think
I'd say like Arby's and Taco Bell are probably the safe ones.
Taco Bell's weird, but you can't. It's hard to separate those things, right? And I think that's where a lot of people talk about these games in terms of morality and blah blah blah. And at the end of the day, does sponsoring that particular game align with pleasing your customers?
I mean, I've read an interview in Adweek, I believe, not a few weeks ago, that had a representative for a big brand said that they will never sponsor Counter-Strike because it involves the most realistic shooting, people in the head, and it has terrorists and counter-terrorism blowing up a bomb, and they just will never touch it. And this is true, while there are major sponsors that will never get into the more realistic for first-person shooters.
Chick-fil-A is probably not getting into esports.
But and as Richard mentioned, if you're a company like Arby's and you have a different style of corporate culture where you're maybe it's like located in the South, or they're big Second Amendment fans, the CEO of the company, whoever it was, probably won't care about that stuff. And yet, Counter-Strike is still, and always has been, one of the best esports to watch, probably up there with fighting games, and maybe Rocket League actually has a pretty good showing now of ease to watch. And it is because it is so unique in terms of it is all around the game mode. It is round based, and it is 5v5 with a timer where the rounds get to end, and it's perfect for broadcasting and
the NFL
little interaction. Yeah, there's no better way, and that's why Search and Destroy always took off for Call of Duty, because that game mode has proven to be probably the best in esports. So no matter how much of the other stuff might affect Counter-Strike, even though like things it could be changed. I've heard suggestions of changing it to like offense and defense, and not counter-terrorists and terrorists. I actually think that would be a good way of maybe.
I was just going to add to that point. I think it's probably a matter of time before we see those changes get implemented. Even if they just downshift it, because it's terrorism that makes everybody squeamish.
It's not great. I mean, I'd say it's not great.
Yeah, well, exactly, right? I mean, and you have to play as a terrorist, and you have to plant a bomb, which is something that terrorists do. And these are real life terrorist organizations in the game, by the way, that are all historically accurate. They're not stereotypical jihadis like in Team America. These are real organizations that existed historically. So, and thematic to each map, you have a different terrorist organization that really existed. I think probably, I mean, even if you shifted it to like FBI drug cartel, something like that, it's a very slight shift, but it would make a big difference in terms of marketing. But I think you're absolutely right. I think we will see changes coming to how they market the game and the content that's in the game. I don't think it'll be as broad as offensive, defensive, which we did during CGS in 2006, 2007, and we put basketball jerseys on them. And it's like, well, why is a guy in a basketball jersey running around with a fucking AK-47? Can you explain that to me? And they called the bomb the package, or
Oh wow!
I don't think the game will ever change that. Although broadcasters might want to go down that route, but I think yeah, there will be actual hard changes in the game language that try and deviate from its now slightly anachronistic, because it's pre 9/11, right? I mean, the game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, that makes
it's a real question. If a game came out now, that a lot of these things in CS exist because they were grandfathered in, right? If a game came out now and used that same terminology and some of the same approaches, I mean, I don't know how far.
It'd be on the front page of every tabloid saying it's a sick game, a terrorist.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think it's
training tool. Yeah, think about what happened with Call of Duty when they had the no Russian level in, which was an absurd outburst, just because the whole point of the level was that you had to kill innocent civilians to fake an atrocity to spark a war retaliation from a government power. So you had to just kill unarmed civilians in an airport while not speaking Russian, so they didn't know it was Russians who were doing it. So that level generated so much and this is, again, that's old now. I mean, these days, the idea of making a game about like terrorism, there's no fucking way. There's no way. Like, you couldn't get it off the ground. It wouldn't, even if it had all the same mechanics. Like, even if it was a fucking battle royale and everyone was on it.
Those goalposts move, brother. That's just a fact. I just thought it was interesting because we went in this same discussion. We've circled from Nessa asking a few minutes ago, what if you were to just reskin a game? Mm-hmm. And the immediate response, Rod was, I believe, the one that said, but I think we were all thinking that, oh, no, nobody's going to buy that. People are going to pan that. This is more of a spectrum to me. And yet we've basically taken something very much on the other end and just changing some in-game terminology, and I think agreed that might actually help the marketing for CSGO. So I actually think
so you're reskinning
there's a lot of ground to be explored in that spectrum.
Well, we're definitely yeah. Well, China reskins Dota. I know Nahaz definitely has a time commitment coming up here.
Yeah.
I like to end these shows with letting the people listening know what the stories we're following are, because a lot of times not everybody is as tuned in because it's not their job to. So I like everybody to just give like a very brief little thing of what story they're paying particular attention to, and I'll go first so people have time to think on theirs. So what we didn't discuss it at all, didn't touch on it, but it's amusing as all hell. The fact that Cuckoo, who was originally banned and then not banned, but Valve was like, hey, we're going to ban you even though China didn't ban you. And no, Nahaz, you don't get to talk about this until the next episode. I will be following that story because I'm very interested to see how Valve covers their ass round 2 with the Cuckoo issue, and then keep following it up until TI when we have a China major and this used to be top tier team cannot play with arguably their best player.
I hope the money's worth it for doing all these deals in China. I really hope so, because that is a fucking travesty. But yeah, I won't talk about it.
I will make that contract with the two of you right now. We will take that on next time because yeah, I think that is a worthy discussion.
Happily. All right. So somebody else. All right. Nahaz, are you following Apex? Can that be my assumption that you're interested in Apex?
I'm following Apex. I'm also, my own concern with Dota is I think there's going to be huge roster drama coming up this year, and I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. If you look at last year, not so far from this point in the season, Virtus Pro could have dropped 4 out of their 5 players and still had their spot at TI under this year's rules. And I think a lot of the responses I get when I bring that up to people are, oh, well, it's not going to happen. Why would the players do that? I think a lot of people underestimate for these non-Western teams or teams outside of Russia and China, even in some cases other organizations, the orgs do have some power. I think there are going to be at least a couple rosters that get blown up this year and keep their spots for TI, and it's going to be some drama.
I mean, Dendi on Tigers isn't working out particularly well. So
Dendi and Mushi, not sure about it.
Have you said washed up? Because that's where I'm going with that.
No, nobody's going to say it because the person in question is as personable and awesome a guy as you.
Yeah, Dendi's cool. I love him. I've met him a few times. It's great. I think he's just not. It's not happening, guys.
Dendi to VP.
It's coming to an end. Everyone knows their career. On the down end, you join like 18 teams. You never win anything at the end. Ride the bench, and you retire quietly into the night, or you can go out on top, saying that you were a starter and you end it. I'm really hoping Dendi does not go into the former.
Although, to play 5 seconds of devil's advocate, there are a whole lot of people that would have said that about No Tail a month before he won TI.
Or Mad. Oh my gosh, No Tail. Talk about Mad. Separate discussion.
Anyway.
Yeah. All right, Slasher. What are you watching?
I think the Activision Blizzard is probably one of the most significant things to happen in the industry right now. If they are firing hundreds of employees tomorrow, there's another report that came out maybe an hour ago saying that no one in the company, several sources in the company, have not heard anything about this yet, and everyone is in fear right now over there about losing their jobs. That company has over 4 or 5 major games within competitive gaming and esports right now. So everything that happens with that company has a large impact on what is going on within the industry. So I think to see how Activision and Blizzard can try to recover, and especially Blizzard, from the situation is going to have long-term effect on everything that happens.
Yeah, I was going to follow that as well. Everyone's doing my stories. Right. Well, okay. I'll just link it to Overwatch just to get an Overwatch hate boner in, and then because
I'm all about that. Yo, bring it on.
Yeah, right. Well, so obviously, I think people are going to find out pretty soon that there has been some massive cost cutting for the Overwatch League and the Overwatch broadcast. I've alluded to some of it. They've cut studio space in half. They're not really talking about that. They're Burbank Studios. You can go look it up. I think they're actually, the people who own the studio space are leasing what Blizzard had previously. You can go get it. You can call them up if you want, Rod, and inquire about the availability. But on top of that as well, I just love this fucking sponsorship for Coca-Cola that everyone thinks is a big deal when Bobby Kotick is on the fucking board for Coca-Cola. And it's like, guys, like, how much fucking smoke and mirrors can I fuck you up with? Because it's like, literally, Coca-Cola sponsored League of Legends, and they didn't like it too much, and the activation wasn't great, and it was specifically Coke Zero, so whatever. But, like, this is quite simply Bobby Kotick leveraging his position on, within both Activision Blizzard and with Coca-Cola to bring in a high-profile name, probably for very little money actually going in as the sponsorship, to make it look like the Overwatch League is actually functioning as the people who were buying slots for $20 million would and more were told that it would, and it isn't, and it never will. So that to me is a much bigger story than anybody has realized yet. And I think the penny's going to drop in 2019, and I can't wait. Because even though there'll be seismic ramifications for the industry, and I've always said I didn't want the Overwatch League to fail, there's always a part of me that loves to see people cursed by their own hubris. So there you go. That's my story.
All right, Nikki, I think you're up.
I mean, for me, same thing with the whole Blizzard layoffs and what's going to happen. I want to see if Activision is going to be sticking around or not. Mm-hmm. It's very personal for me just because like family and friends involved. At least they're out, thank God, I guess. So they're not worried if their jobs are secure. But the fact that that's been happening, in the last like few months, and then suddenly this, I'm like, yeah, that's not surprising. So I really want to see where this is going.
Hope everyone got paid in stock options.
Right. And then obviously the, like anything involving Valve is always of big interest to me. So what their response is with Cuckoo, even I might be like the one of like 5 people still like interested with what they're going to be doing with Artifact. So I'm curious because all that ties in together.
What is that?
What's an Artifact?
I mean,
at this point, it's appropriately named.
Yeah.
Not bad.
So, I mean, I love the game. I love the game that I played in closed beta. So for me, it's just like a we'll see. So those are what I'm following, and then anything visa related, so like China, all that stuff, because I always get dragged into that one way or another.
China and visas. All right. Well, you've been hearing from the experts in there we go. Experts in esports. Vowels are great for the last about hour and a half or so. So what we are following, we got Cuckoo and some roster drama. Dive into Blizzard with mass layoffs, potential merger company changes and everything. And then, of course, the lovely Overwatch League and whether or not it's going to die, or rather, what exactly will be the timer on its gravestone, as it looks to be closer than we thought it might be. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We had Richard Lewis, Nahaz, Slasher, and Sajedene. Thank you for joining us on the Cooldown, and we'll see you guys on the next one.